Good evening. Welcome to Politics and Prose. My name is Jasmine. I'm an event staffer here at Politics and Prose, where we host a range of in-store events along with classes and trips. Before we get started today, just a friendly reminder to silence your cell phones if you haven't already. And also, when we get to the Q&A portion of the event, we have placed a microphone over here in front of this white pillar. If you're able, we ask you to come up to the microphone so we can all hear your question. All right. This evening, I'm excited to welcome Tova Reich, celebrating the release of Camp Jeff. Somewhere in the Catskills, there's a camp called Camp Jeff. Tova Reich's newest novel, on the heels of her award-winning Mother India, is a raucous and biting tale of this re-education camp for alleged sex offenders. Tova Reich is the author of novels such as Mara, Master of the Return, and My Holocaust. Her most recent novel, Mother India, was longlisted for the South Asian Literature Prize and was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. Her stories have appeared in The Atlantic, Harper's, Plowshares, and in her collection, The House of Love and Prayer. Tova Reich will be joined in conversation with Judith Plotz. Judith is Professor Emeritus of English at George Washington University, where she taught for almost 50 years, chaired the English department, and served as director of the humanities program. Her specialties were Romanticism, 19th century humanities, Indian post-colonial literature, and children's literature. Among her publications are Romanticism and the Vocation of Childhood, an edition of Rudyard Kipling's Just So Stories for Penguin, and scores of articles on childhood, literature, and society, including Tagore and the Warsaw Ghetto, Korshak's production of The Post Office. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Tova Reich and Judith Plotz.
Judy, you have to come. It's like tennis. Right. Now, in the, am I audible? In the days, the many, many days I was teaching Romanticism to undergraduates, I would often tell my students about Coleridge's response to a particular poem of Wordsworth's, a short poem that began, "There was a boy, you knew him well, you cliffs and islands of Wenander." And Coleridge said, this is a beautiful poem, and Coleridge said of this poem, "I would have known it anywhere. Had I seen these lines running wild in the Arabian desert, I would have cried out, Wordsworth, Wordsworth." Well, now let me read you one sentence, not from a romantic poem of 1798, but from Tova's contemporary novel, which is set in 2020. This is one sentence from the novel, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the plot. It has, can you hear me without the microphone? No, actually, that's true. It has nothing to do with the plot, and it's about a character who really doesn't appear in the novel at all, except through his father. His father is the lawyer of the protagonist, and has come to visit the protagonist, whose name is Gershon. And this is the single sentence I want you to note. Gershon watched as this most faithful defender and ally across the decades retreated to pat himself down, searching his person everywhere for some rag of a mask, coming up in his desperation, this is 2020, coming up in his desperation with a pathetic improvisation at last, the reconfiguration of the blue velvet yarmulke, stamped on its lining with a legend, Bar Mitzvah of Gordon Fink, Shepsi's son, now Rabbi Giddel Fink of Dharamshala, India, presiding from a replica of 770 Eastern Parkway, the wholly multi-storied red brick Chadband headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, bizarrely recreated and tucked into the foothills of the Himalayas like some alien virtual reality, like a colonizing interloper, like a pagan temple. Okay, that's one sentence. And had I seen that sentence running wild by the Broad Branch Market, I would have cried out, Tova, Tova. Now, because Tova Reich has an absolutely distinctive voice. It's a voice that is funny, that is, of course, Jewish, that is, of course, knowing, that is, of course, exuberant, that is, of course, at the same time ironic, that is at the same time contemporary, that is at the same time unsentimental, that is at the same time hyperbolic, that is sly, that is fertile, and that is exact. You know about that blue velvet yarmulke. So, Tova in Camp Jeff has written a book that resembles only a book by Tova Reich. It's like she has this unique voice. At a distance, it may seem a normal Jewish American novel set in the familiar sentimental ground of full of the nostalgia of the old Borscht Belt and the Catskills, where a philanthropist has established a camp. But do not judge this book by its very jolly cover. This camp is different. So, Tova, will you tell us a bit about Camp Jeff and its campers?
Oh, okay. I have to talk.
You talk. You talk.
How do you use this thing? You just hold it.
You hold.
Okay. No, it's all right. I'll do it. Um, Camp Jeff is actually a converted hotel. Anybody who knows the Catskills from the old days, the glory days of what they called the Borscht Belt, knew that there were these big hotels, and I had in mind one of the hotels. It's basically a composite of a bunch of the hotels there. And what it is a rich guy buys it. All these hotels are now abandoned or burned down for the insurance, actually. And they this hotel is abandoned, and a rich person named Jeffrey Epstein buys the hotel, but not that Jeffrey Epstein, not the Jeffrey Epstein that you all know about. And it's really true, and I see it now more and more, but I always saw it, that names repeat themselves. A lot of people have your name. So if somebody is looking up your name, there would be a lot of people with the same name. And I don't know how many Jeffrey Epsteins there are in the world, but there are a lot of people. I'm setting aside being that kind of Jeffrey Epstein. It's the same name. Was that thing supposed to be on it?
It's a sanitary.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, thank you for that. Oh, anyway, you're right. Okay, Judy. But anyway, so his name is Jeffrey Epstein, and he is very pained by the behavior and the notoriety of the other Jeffrey Epstein that we all know about. And he decides that he wants, and he's a wealthy man. He inherited his grandma's, Hungarian grandma's cosmetic and lotion and keep yourself young forever business. And so he's a wealthy man, and he buys this old hotel and converts it, gradually converts it into something that is called Camp Jeffrey Epstein, and decides that what he's going to do is rehabilitate people who are caught up in the Me Too. I refer to it sometimes as caught in the hashtag. Many of them are really scummy people, and there are 10 of them. 9 in this first class, the first cohort at Camp Jeffrey Epstein, Camp Jeff, are 9 men and 1 woman, with a staff of psychiatrists, social workers, and so on. So yeah, that's a
Right.
good.
Okay. Well, so maybe you'll set the scene a little bit in this hotel. There's a nice passage here that describes right over here. It begins though.
Oh, thank you. I have to say I never saw the book in person.
Yeah.
Okay, just let me see where I am.
This is basically the setting, the physical setting.
Excuse me, I just want to see what I'm going to be reading. Yes. So the social worker there is a woman named Hetty Nussbaum.
We'll get to her, yeah.
Yeah. So she is really kind of overeducated. She has a degree in social work. She has in addition, she has a PhD in rabbinics from Yale University. And what else? She wrote a novel also. So those 3 things are true about Hetty. And she decides to do what is called the Daf Yomi, which is a daily page of Talmud, which she thinks is appropriate for the particular groups there. I think this is where this chapter is. It has to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but this is just a physical
Yeah. So
description,
she
not
wants to
the-
figure out where to set her class, and that's what this is about. Though the good Jeffrey Epstein was now, of course, I call the other Jeffrey Epstein he's the good Jeffrey Epstein, not the one that everybody knows about. So when I need to refer to him very often as the good Jeffrey Epstein. Though the good Jeffrey Epstein was now, of course, the proud owner of the entire former. I have to tell you something again. That's why I didn't want to be just reading. The place used to be called the Luxion Hotel and Country Club. So, okay, when I mention Luxion, it's a reference to what the place used to be called. Though the good Jeffrey Epstein was now, of course, the proud owner of the entire former Luxion complex, for his highly selective Camp Jeffrey Epstein rehabilitation program, he had thus far renovated only the main building, including the grand lobby, the rooms and suites, the dining room, the tea room, and so on, as well as nostalgically updating what became the Mental Health Design Award-winning Jeffrey Epstein Social Hall. Still scattered everywhere over the grounds were the monumental ruins of the golden age of this shining Catskill Borscht Belt resort, a city in itself, the Swiss chalets, the log cabin, shopping plaza, the ice skating ring, the roller skating ring, the natatorium, outdoor swimming pool, ski lodge, artificial ski slope, 20-lane bowling alley, miniature golf course, and rolling championship golf greens, the synagogue modeled on the Great Temple in Jerusalem, the Bridge of Sighs with its quaint shops spanning the Neversink River, and gondolas gliding underneath powered by singing gondoliers. All of these landmarks picked through by scavengers and sentimentalists, but still so evocative of lost time.
All right, very good, thank you. Now, all of your campers have been Me Too'd. I've gotten into the habit of calling them campers. You call them
Yeah, I
campers.
call them
They're very long in the tooth, though, mostly. Could you tell us a little bit about where the book come from? I mean, that is, why did the Me Too movement present itself to you as your subject, as a novelistic subject? What made it attractive?
You know, I really don't know the answer to that. How I have to think back how it all came to me. It usually comes to me in a way that, as if it already exists in the world. It's kind of a mystical thing. It's as if there is a camp and a place for these people, and almost everything that happens exists. And I'm not writing it, I'm finding it, I'm looking for it. And that's basically the task that I engage in when I write a book. And so when I think about it, there are certain elements I know well. I know the Catskills very well. It's part of my youth. And I know those hotels. And, you know, I know men who deserve to be Me Too'd. And I kind of looked at that whole movement, and you know, there were many worthy things about it, but it was a little bit strange to me. And in particular, the novel deals with Me Too people who are in New York. It's the first. It's the first of the Me Too camps. He intends, the good Jeffrey Epstein intends to open Camp Jeffs all over the country, eventually all over the world. But this is the first, and this one he chose sort of superstars, either superstars in the normal world or just superstars in the degree to which they deserve to be Me Too'd. You know, Judy, I really don't know exactly how it all came to me. I never know.
Did the timing of COVID have anything to do with it? The camp is just opening when the
Right.
plague strikes.
Right. So
did you have that in mind?
Yeah, I had it. It was all there. It was all in. I had it all in mind. I mean, the way the book moves, it moves over 4 months in the year 2020, starting basically late January, in more February, it gets really settled in, and goes through mid-May of that year. And over the course of that period, there was, in addition to the Me Too movement, there was the onset of COVID, and then there were all kinds of awful things that happened having to do with anti-Semitism. The book kind of glides into it. And anti-Semitism toward the end, having to do with the disposition of the main character, Gershon Gordon. And there was just so much going on. And I just as a writer, I mean, if I could take a moment just to say, it's a very hard thing to write about a contemporary thing that just happened. That is to use that. I mean, nothing happened in the real world that happens in the book, but simply to use those events and transform them into a work of fiction, a work of art, that was a complicated task. We don't have recollections of tranquility here. We don't have distance. We don't have any of that stuff. So it was kind of a challenge, I guess, in that sense. And not so much that I was interested in a challenge, because just writing a novel is very hard. But yeah, but you know, there were a lot of parts in this novel that I knew about. I felt I could work with it. I could handle it. You know, starting with the Catskills and the camp and the lectures and all that stuff. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Gershon Gordon. I mean, he's not exactly the hero, but he's certainly the protagonist. All right, let's start with his name. And in general, and maybe we should talk about names in another chapter of this, because the names are all very, very good. And some of them are very, very bad. I mean, you know, some of them are very wicked. But all right, this guy's name is George. I mean, that's on his birth certificate, George Gordon, except he's really Gershon Gordon, and he has the same name as Lord Byron, George Gordon, and he's also another George Gordon. Well, could you talk about those names, which are not accidental?
Well, you have to, you know, if you keep in mind that one of the underlying premises of the book is using a name, Camp Jeffrey Epstein, but it's not that Jeffrey Epstein. So underneath there is an assumption that many people can have the same names. they could also possibly even be very similar in ways that you didn't foresee, couldn't imagine. In this particular book, there are three women named Zoya. Yeah.
Yep.
And there is, of course, the good Jeffrey Epstein. What else? Who else is there in the names? There is the character Hetty
Hedda.
Hetty
Yes.
Nussbaum. I don't know if any of you, some of you probably do remember Hetty Nussbaum and Hedda Nussbaum, but not Hetty. And you shouldn't call this Hetty Hedda. She doesn't like it. And so many of her characteristics, she enters in a kind of complex relationship. She's the social worker. And what other names were kind of good?
Well, there are there's the Zodek whose name is Kutzer.
Oh, yeah.
Zodek, also known as Dick Kutzer.
Yeah, because his real name was Sadik. His real name, that's a story in itself. I'll tell you a little publishing story. What happened in the inner worlds of publishing. I had a character there named Sadik Kushner. So he was, what was he? I mean, he liked boys, and he was basically a rabbi, and he was a rabbi of a boys' school and got into big trouble. And it was a big scandal. That's in the story, that's in the book. And in the publishing story, at one point, I think the lawyers read the book, and because his original name was Tzadik Kushner, and they said, "Oh, Kushner, isn't he related to Trump?" And I said, "Yeah, he's related to Trump. I think he's very litigious," they said. "We have to change his name." Yeah, litigious, he brings lawsuits. So we have to change his name. So we changed it to Kutcher, which just popped up because I wanted a similar name. A lot of his activities or movements in the book have to do with his sense of being important because of his connection to this great man and Trump. And so Kutcher's also was one of the big hotels in the Catskills. For those who know the Catskills, it was one of the biggies like the Concord and Grossinger's and so on. So I thought, oh, okay, let him be Kutcher. And that was Sadik. And some people called him Dick for short.
Yeah.
So that worked out pretty well for me, yeah.
But Gershon,
Gershon,
but Gershon, he's obsessed with his alter egos, right?
Correct. Yes, he is.
He is. May I say that he's very Byronic in the sense that he dresses in this dapper. He has his dapper black velvet yarmulke and his handmade black boots and his black jeans and his black sweaters. He's his beautiful white hair, and he's very Byronic and very a poser. But he's also. But talk about the other George Gordon.
Well, there was a figure in, I believe it was in the 18th century, during the wars in England. There was a Lord George Gordon. He was a Scottish lord, Episcopalian or something, a Protestant. And he led the Protestants against the Catholics in a great war that, during that period when the Catholics were trying to become part of British life again after having been pushed out by Henry VIII and all of that, and all the fights that went on over those years. And the thing about this guy, George Gordon, was he was a really strange guy because he was the leader, and they burned down half of London. They burned down Newgate Prison, and then he went on. He went to jail, but I don't know for sure if it was before that, but or after that, but definitely while he was in jail, he converted to Judaism. He became a super Orthodox Jew with, obviously he was a person who thought about religion a lot, and a kind of serious person. He didn't live that long. He lived to the age of 40 and died in Newgate. And he became an Orthodox Jew. He put a mezuzah on his cell door. He was able to do that because he was, this is true, all this is true, this happened, that's history. He put a mezuzah on his cell door. He didn't, if you were a Jew and not an observant Jew, he didn't let you into his cell. He ate only kosher food, stuff like that. And the connection, the thing that works out in the book is Gershon Gordon is the son of Holocaust survivors. So typically for many Holocaust survivors, they would not, if they had a child, they would not let him go out into the world with a name like Gershon. That is just a total giveaway. And so on his birth certificate, they called him George Gordon. So somehow that idea of himself as George Gordon also entered his bloodstream. And as things kind of devolved for him, when he's caught up in the Me Too stuff, and then there is the COVID epidemic, and stuff happens to him while he's at the camp. He's a writer. He's trying to, I don't want to tell you everything because maybe you're going to read the book. But he's writing a book. He's a writer, and he's writing a book while he's at Camp Jeff. And something happens with that book, and he feels in many ways persecuted. And so he begins to see himself as George Gordon. He sees himself as incarcerated, and he also sees himself, as Judy talked about, as a Byronic figure, you know, as a kind of dashing, who also dies young. Anyway, he is the main character of the novel.
He's main, and I don't know, would you say that Hedda Nussbaum, the interestingly named Hetty.
Don't call me Hedda.
Hetty, don't call me Hedda, because Hedda has a, you know, all right. She is the, would you say she's the, you know, the second most important character?
I would say so, yeah. Probably.
And Hedda is, well, like Gershon, she's an intellectual,
Right.
put upon intellectual, and part of her therapy is to urge a daily passage of Talmud, and she particularly wants this is what tractate Nida to be a part of Gershon's cure. And so could you talk a little bit about the way that figures, tractate Nida, and how it's relevant to the book?
Well, the Talmud is made up of a lot of tractates, like sections, sort of. This one is tractate Nida. Nida means like menstruation, actually. You know, the laws involving impurities and menstruation, things like that. But that doesn't come to him so much through, it doesn't come to Gershon so much through Hedda. It comes through another affiliation, through his friend, his lawyer, the one you read about with the son who is now Shepsi's son, who is now a rabbi in the Chabad guy in Dharamshala, in a facsimile of 777 Eastern Parkway. But it's not 77? 770 Eastern Parkway. Walter knows, he lived across the street from them. So let's see, what were we talking about? About Nida. Oh yeah, Shepsi wants Gershon, after he's caught up in the Me Too thing and goes through a very, very severe depression in his house, you know, just sort of lets himself completely go. until suddenly gets this invitation out of the blue to be part of Camp Jeff. Shepsy, his friend, Shepsy Fink, would like him, has another client who got in trouble with women having a kind of voyeur, peeping Tom type, who is in jail. And he wants him to have a daf yomi thing that they do. Gershon could do it from the mess of his apartment, and the other guy could do it from his jail cell. I don't know if you people ever played chess with a prisoner, like postcard chess when you were little. You know, you send your moves to each other, so it would be something like that. That would be the concept behind it. It all sounds really funny, but you know what? It's really a tragic story. It's a really tragic story, and every time I read it, I feel like I think I might cry. So yeah.
But Tom, Tova, I cannot think of another Jewish American writer who uses Talmud so much as you. Yeah. So and it's very much at the forefront of this book. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm studying Talmud now, and it's just great stuff, and why shouldn't I use it? I mean, it works very well in this book for these characters. So, yeah. This I had an interview with some rabbi. He said, "You use a lot of Talmud this time." I said, "Yeah."
Right. Okay, but all right, let's move over.
I usually use more Old Testament. This time more Talmud, but I do use texts. Texts are extremely important to me. I mean, I'm very serious about texts. I continue to study and learn, and so if I rip anybody off, these are the guys I rip off.
But it figures novelistically as well as part of,
That's true. I
it
try
works
to do
in the
that.
book in ways maybe we shouldn't discuss. I don't know in terms of giving things away, but all right. But let's talk about tragic elements, but it's also comic element. I mean, one of the, along with Me Too, as the novel evolves, more and more becomes about anti-Semitism. And one of Gershon's traits is that he sees anti-Semitism everywhere. When a manuscript of his is destroyed, and he talks about it in terms of pogroms, in terms of Kristallnacht, in terms of anti-Semitism. On the other hand, I mean, and he mentions it all the time. On the other hand, there is a very sharp passage here, a sort of a moment of recall when Gershon has gone to one of Bad Jeffrey's parties, and Bad Jeffrey has all sorts of photographs of himself with ex-presidents and prime ministers. That's me with MBS, he says. That's me with Woody. And what's with Adolf, Gershon said, because there's a commissioned picture of Epstein with what looks like a concentration camp guard. It's to remind me that they can come for me again anytime, friend, Epstein says. Gershon wagged a finger at Epstein. That's a big no-no, Gatsby. He calls him Gatsby. That's so nice. The ever host. Diverting holy Holocaust imagery to prop up your own private trauma. And we can't really say that Gershon maybe doesn't do it. And yet, as the book devolves, Gershon eventually calls that calls the whole, says that everything in his life, and the Me Too persecution too, can be explained in terms of anti-Semitism. That his whole life. Wait a minute. Never mind. I won't find. Oh dear. Anyway, he says it's all anti-Semitism, and he ultimately, and that triggers the final episode. No, don't worry.
Is that essential?
No, that's not essential. It's a very beautiful bookmark. And that triggers the final episode of the book, which is the color war. And can you talk about the color war, which is obviously the proper culmination of one's time, one's months at camp?
Yeah, the color war. I mean, it's really the ending of the book, so I don't want to talk about it in great detail. Give it away in case you're inclined to take it out of the library and read it. The thing about it is that Gershon, as time passes, feels there are many people, specifically Jews, who kind of see the world through a prism of anti-Semitism all the time, and they attribute certain things that happen to them or things that just are happening in the world to anti-Semitism, sometimes rightly, sometimes not correctly. This becomes a stronger and stronger force with Gershon, and there is indeed a kind of anti-Semitic group or movement, or maybe not, in the sense that it could also be his fantasy that comes to life in the book with a huge kind of tragic ending. And this is the color war. One side of the color war are the fighters against anti-Semitism. That's the blue team. And then there's the white team in their long white sheet robes and their hoods and so on. And they are the white team, and the confrontation basically takes up the final pages of the book with real consequences. And the kind of culmination that occurs mirrors in many ways, with apologies, I say, as a writer, sort of maybe going to that material, because I usually don't write about that period of time in terms of the Shoah. I talk about it as it is played out in our times in terms of memory and so on. But it has all sorts of kind of touches, feelings, evocations of the Shoah, and yeah. So that's the end of the color war, and the question is, who wins? Who wins? Who won the color war? But anyway, I mean, that's not really the question, but if you're in camp, that's what you want to know.
Who wins color war? And actually, I think that's the end of the book, which is very much a book of of this period, of this time, and it's perhaps and it's a book that is both extraordinarily funny and and tragicomic altogether. And if we're talking about apocalyptic endings, I think we've come to a non-apocalyptic ending now. And now maybe Tova, Tova, do you want to say anything else before we take questions? Before you take questions?
No, I think I already talked too much. I said, yeah. I kind of. Did I give a lot away? Do you not have to read the book now? No, it'll be in the libraries.
Okay.
No, that's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Are you ready for questions? Okay. All right. There's a microphone here.
Yeah, this is
right here. If you would come up.
Anyone have a question? Well. Oh, you're going to ask a question. Thank you, Kelly.
Hi there, thank you so much. I'm curious about your writing process. I'm always interested in sort of how authors go about it. And is it anything different than in the past that you experienced this time?
What do you mean by that
like,
part?
You've written other books, so was the process different in some way this time, or was it sort of similar?
I think it was similar. It takes a long time. It takes about 3 years. It's not like you're working all the time on the book, but that is the main thing you're doing. The process is, for me, usually just walking around, doing a lot of walking. The walking is, somebody once told me this little story about he was in a writer's retreat and came into his room, and on the wall somebody had written, "It can be solved by walking. It can be solved by walking. It can be solved by walking." So I didn't hear that and then start walking. I was already walking, and so yes, and it just comes together. It's tied in actually with what I said earlier about finding it. You suddenly you're at an impasse. You think I might not be able to go on. Something has to happen. You know what the next thing is, but you don't know how to transition to it. And you take a walk and you solve it. And when you do, almost all the time, it seems right. When it doesn't seem right, you sometimes let it pass. The way we all do, we kind of get little bit lazy, but mostly no. Mostly I try not to do that. That's basically my process. I sit there and I suffer.
Okay, thank you for that advice.
Hi, do I know you?
Yeah, so you do know me, but I don't know.
That's my son.
Yeah, hi. So you said something I found really striking,
Really?
Mommy,
You hadn't heard it before?
which I didn't know, that you have this whole reality as a reality that you have to find
Yeah.
in your head, and I never knew that. So forgive me for asking this, but with that reality and the other reality, do you ever get confused?
I don't know. What do you think? Have I looked like a confused mother to you? Did I act like you've read maybe all or most of my books by now, and have you seen me devolving into one of my characters?
No, which is why I never knew. Which is why it was surprising to me that you said that. So
Well, I think
that was why I
no.
wanted to ask the question.
Well, it is a kind of reality, and I really see when I think about aesthetics, I see it as most people who read think harken back to the person who wrote it, the artist who painted it, and so on. Try to learn something about them from it. You're not going to learn too much about them if it's the real thing. I think it's a separate universe. It's a completely separate universe. It's like living in more than one place at one time. And interestingly, with the other books, this is my 7th novel. I forget characters' names. It's like it happened, it was found, and it existed like a world, and then it's over. Yeah. I'm glad it wasn't part of your childhood. Oh my God, I would have gotten ill right here.
Hi, Tova.
Hey, Rob.
I've read your books, and you are, with reason, referred to as a brilliant satirist. And I just am curious, not specifically on Camp Jeff, but just this genre that you are in
Right.
of satire. I mean, you self-describe as you live on the periphery of Washington, D.C. or something like that.
Fringe.
Fringe, okay. Washington, it doesn't do irony. It does a lot of parody. It doesn't appreciate satire. How do you, as a satirist operating in the current milieu, kind of think about your genre?
I am so separated from, other than, these recent events, which were painful for me, I think for a lot of us. I am so not a Washington person. It's kind of shocking that I lived here this long, but I think in a certain way it might have been good because I'm quite insulated from my surroundings. I just am not part of Washington. And I don't know many novelists or many writers who think of themselves in serious artistic ways who are part of the scene. There are writers, very talented writers who write. I mean, Judy, what do you think? I mean, it's not a place that attracts writers who are thinking in aesthetic ways. Or are you thinking aesthetically? What do you think? Yeah, it's right. It doesn't lend itself. So you have to, in some way, insulate yourself. Take your walks, or just be very. It's like a separate thing you carry around with you, and I think it's like that for others who happen to land in this place. Thanks for the question. Hey.
Hey, Tova.
Hi. How are you?
How are
Simone.
you? I'm good. So I'm really interested in this concept of writing about something as it's actually happening. And, I don't actually know the dates at which you wrote this, but anti-Semitism before and after October 7th is different trajectories. And even now, it's still unfolding. And you could even argue that the Me Too, that story isn't finished yet. It's more in the rearview mirror, of course, as is COVID, than anti-Semitism is. But it's, the history of it is still being understood. And so I sort of wonder whether you have this idea of like, oh, I have to do another one afterwards, or, do I need, how do you keep up with something that's continually changing as you're writing it? And by the time people read it, it's also got a different story.
That's right. I mean, it's something that I think I've thought about, because I'm aware, like you, about how anti-Semitism has just really flared up and emerged and become quite central. It was already becoming central during that year at that point. And it doesn't obviate the fact that one can see it there, and having created a character who is like wired for anti-Semitism and thinks things are anti-Semitic. Sometimes things really are anti-Semitism. I have to say I have thought about it. I am thinking about it right now because I have a collection of stories, novellas coming that I'm finishing up, and I am moving in the direction without actually. It's not actually placed in this particular period, but it touches on themes such as Zionism, for instance, which has a very pivotal role in anti-Semitism that's played out, for instance, in Israel and for Jews in general. I mean, you could be a Jew, but you can't be a Zionist, that sort of thing. Although it's set in the late 20th century. But yeah, I mean, you can't think this way, because if you do, I mean, something else is always going to happen. And it's not my goal to only write about what's happening now. It's just that the stuff that was happening, so much was happening in 2020. I mean, it was one thing after the other. The whole world shut down with this COVID. And, there was a lot of things that touched a lot of communities. The ending of this novel is really quite tragic in a suffocating way, and it was and in the writing of it, I thought very much. Very present for me was the character of George Floyd, for instance, who basically died of suffocation. He couldn't breathe, not being able to breathe. Not being able to breathe is a pretty characteristic Shoah thing, of course, gas chambers. You can't breathe in the gas chambers. And so I think about these things. A novel has to have a certain kind of reality so that the reader stays with you and believes in it. This book is set in this period. In the end, I couldn't put George Floyd in because the book ended around May 14th. And the events surrounding George Floyd were later in the month of May, like the 26th, 28th. I don't remember the exact date, but yes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it gives me a lot of material forever if I sort of think of myself as I'm always going, that I'm always going to write about what's happening next because all of this awful stuff happens. But I'm not going to do that. It's not my intention.
Any other questions?
No, they know everything.
Oh, curiosity about the rest. In that case,
Oh, here's somebody.
good.
Hi.
Hi. So I haven't read the book as a.
Yeah,
but
most people haven't.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay.
You spoke a little bit about sort of the characteristic of survivors or others who don't, who give their children names that will sort of pass, right? And I
Yeah.
was wondering how writing under the name Tova Reich sort of affects, if that's something you think about when I've thought about.
No, I don't think about it. It's like that. Some people think I'm Scandinavian. Then they see me and they could see right away, oh God, she's not Scandinavian. So, yeah. What's so funny, Danny? Okay. What do you think?
We're ready for signing.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much to Tova and Judith. Please be sure to find the book